my main background, as Roman said, I'm an anthropologist. I am a migration scholar. I work. I have been working in migration studies since 2012, and like many years before the displacement in 2022. And my dissertation was about Ukrainian labor migrants to Italy. I was focused mostly on women migration and social identities and life trajectories of Ukrainian women who migrated in their 40s to different countries of Europe, but specifically to Italy. Also, like my main focus was on Italy. And after that, I migrated myself. So I live in Sweden since 2017, and I work in Swedish university, one of them. But I also have projects with other universities around Europe, and I continue working with migration and displacement and Ukrainian displacement. So this, like, my background helps me to set current displacement in like a bit wider context of labor migration. As you all know, we had like more or less 6 million of labor migrants before this displacement, and now it's more or less 5 and 6 million of people who migrated after 2022. So we have quite a strong and big diaspora around the world. My presentation, because like Ukrainian displacement is a quite intense topic, so it's like yeah, there are a lot of aspects and a lot of factors and a lot of different angles that we can take for discussion. But my current focus will be on anthropology, because I'm anthropologist, like primarily, and because I'm sitting in field since 2022 quite tense. So I'm working in different countries in Europe with Ukrainian communities, and I'm interviewing people. I'm doing participant observations. And then, so I will be focusing mostly about two countries today, on Sweden and Romania. These two countries are quite, they are not similar in any context. They have different social welfares. They have different integrational policies and different implementation of temporal protective directive for Ukrainians. This is interesting, I think, like to look into different contexts. And of course, I will be not having the possibility like to tell the whole story of this displacement, but at least something, and with more focus on women migration, because as you know, almost 80% of current Ukrainian migrants from Ukraine are women, and very often it's like there are women with children and women with children who live transnationally. It means that they have their partners and their families, their mothers and fathers left behind in Ukraine. So it's not only about migration from one point A to point B, but it's mostly about transnational migration, where we have different members of the family, of the same extended family, in different places and in different contexts. Yes. But yes, so when I talked about my field work in different countries, so it's mainly based, and this presentation is mainly based on two projects. One is about debordering of Europe and analysis of responses in the UK, Poland, and Romania. And this is like a project from Northumbria University. And another is from Swedish University, and this is also field work that I conducted in Sweden during 2022-2023. So I like mainly, so I'm the main researcher in both projects, and I am the researcher who is responsible for field work in these projects. So it's not like I'm only analyzing the data, but I'm collecting the data, and I'm doing all the field work. So I put just two links if in case you would be interested. The first one is the main description, like the general description of the project, and the other one is our like publications that my colleague Dr. Oksana Shmuler-Gren, professor in Gothenburg University, and we prepared together. So it's one of the results of our field work. So in case you would be interested to know more, so you can just open these links and to read more. So my main question for this presentation is, like, my main focus is on Ukrainian transnational families, as I already said, and families with temporary protection status. So I'm looking primarily on those who migrated, who left Ukraine after 2022. And my main question is about how they strategize their lives in protracted displacement in relation to their parental responsibilities in receiving societies, as well as back in Ukraine. So I took Sweden and I took Romania from my other project, and I have 15 interviews conducted in Sweden and 13 interviews conducted in south and north of Romania in September, October 2023. So as you see, this is quite early time of Ukrainian displacement. So today is 2025, so we have quite a change dynamic. But this is how we could get, you know, some understanding of what was going at that moment, yes, and how people strategized their future, and how they saw the situation with temporal protection directives that they should be dealing with. As you all know, so like this displacement, like Ukrainian displacement after the full-scale Russian invasion, was put in the context, in the European context, when all people from Ukraine are eligible, like all Ukrainian citizens and all people who have a permanent residence permit in Ukraine, they are eligible for getting so-called temporal protection status. And this status, it's a totally new policy in Europe. So this temporal protection directive was implemented and was activated by European Union for the first time. So it was prepared 20 years before. It was prepared directly after the Yugoslavian so-called war in former Yugoslavia, when Europe faced like enormous wave of refugees from Balkan countries. And after that, they prepared this like special document, Temporal Protection Directive, in case something like Balkan wars would happen again. And of course, like in our unstable world, of course, wars are happening, and people need to migrate. And we know that there were many other waves of migration from different countries, and one of the biggest was from Syria since 2013 and later. Still, the protection directive was not activated at that time. And yeah, there are a lot of discussions like in migration studies, but also in different, in other disciplines as well. Why this directive was not activated before? And there is also discussion about so-called privilegedness of Ukrainians. I mean, it's like how European Union see Ukrainian migrants. And one of their arguments in this discussion is about that Ukrainians are white and Christian, and other people are not a part of the same Christian civilization or the same community, European community of the same values. And that's why it was the case. But for people who work with Ukrainian migration like deeper, and who probably took some time to go deeper into the details of the whole process, of how it had been organized and how, like, all the details around that. For those people, this discussion is not so simple, because as we know, Ukrainians had, like Ukraine had a visa-free regime with European Union since 2017. And when the war started, when the full-scale invasion started, all Ukrainians who had biometric passports were allowed, were eligible to leave. So they all had the right to cross the border, to cross the European border, and then to go to whatever country they want. This is first moment. So, like, on the moment of this, of the beginning of the war, the borders for Ukrainians were already opened. Yes, and then another thing, it's cultural proximity and historical experience, historical legacy that all the countries around Ukraine, Poland, Romania, Hungary, and Slovakia had before. So all these countries had the legacy of having some sort of aggression from Soviet Union or from Russia directly. And the moment of support that we experienced in the beginning of the war, unfortunately, it's not the case right now, but in the beginning of the war, this was quite a big moment, quite a big support from for Ukrainians, as you remember. This support can be also explained by this historical and cultural links. And the same situation we have, by the way, with Ukraine, with Syrians and Turkey. I can develop this more if you want to compare, if you want me to compare. But I mean, in general, so I just want to use this moment when I am presenting, you know, like for people who are not probably very tight connected to the discussion about the temporal protection directive. I just want to make this discussion a little bit wider. Yes, so of course there was this moment of discrimination, of collective or massive discrimination on some level. But on the other hand, we have also other moments and other circumstances that we need to take into consideration. And if we do this, we can think about this protection from a little bit deeper position, or somehow a little bit more analytical position than just to make it quite simple, as I personally observe this in quite a lot of texts written about Ukrainian displacement. So what is special about this directive? That this directive opened possibility, like the main possibility for all people from Ukraine to get refuge during the time of the war, until the war ends, as it was formulated in the policy. But as we understand, no one, almost probably I should not say no one, but main European discussion, like discussion around Ukrainians, was not in the direction that we will be having this war, you know, for 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 10 years. It was mostly we need to help these people, probably for a few months, for a few weeks, probably for a year. So this direction was activated for 3 years, from 2022 up to March 2025. But as we know, the war didn't end, and the directive allows people to stay in Europe and to gives a right to work and also to choose a place to live. But at the same time, we have, as I call it, radical uncertainty. What can happen with all these millions of people when the directive ends? It's because this special policy doesn't apply any procedure and any any potential to count all these years that people spent in Europe in potential residence permit. So in other words, it means that all these years that people spent in different countries in Europe, this is years where they somehow disconnected from Ukrainian society and from Ukrainian economy, Ukrainian politics, but at the same time, they are not a part in any case of any other society. And they are not even on the way to being a part, yes? So it's like a situation of, we call it limbo, but it's not quite limbo. It's a situation where it's a first time. So this is first time. It happens first time, and that's why there is no like space for somehow another procedures around that. And like in addition to all of this, every European country implemented this directive in their own way. So what we see now, we see quite a wide difference between countries. So, for example, how this directive was implemented by Poland differs extremely from how it did Norway, or, for example, how Germany implemented the directive, and it differs enormously from how it was done in Sweden, for example. It means that in some countries, people just need only to work to be able to survive, and it doesn't matter if these people have disabilities, or they are in older ages, or they have probably small children, as for example in Poland. So in Poland, like a lot of Ukrainians work, a majority of Ukrainians work, and we know that Ukrainians even increased their Polish GDP. This is like from official Polish studies by 2%. But in other countries, as for example, Germany, people can have space only to go to low-skilled jobs, but to get some space, for example, for learning language, or for validating their diplomas, or for making some other to develop situation for themselves in other way. In any case, what we know for sure, that March 2027 will be the last moment, the last month, where the directive will be stopped for always. And it means that by that time, so today, we have 1.5 years until that moment. But what we observe in Europe, this main questions that all Ukrainian sociologists like to ask all people in Ukraine, and not only people in Ukraine: do they come back, or do they stay? Do they return, or do they stay? This question, from this perspective, I would not say does not mean sense, but in some way this is a question about this is a question which is extremely difficult to answer for almost every Ukrainian family, because this question is not about feelings for Ukraine, or not about like supporting Ukraine, or not about this, but it's mostly about what European Union will decide in 6 or 12 months. Yes. Yes. So we can look into two countries that I chose. I can say a few words about Sweden and Romania. So, like Sweden was absolutely unknown country for Ukrainians before 2022. We had a very small diaspora in Sweden. It was only 12,000 people living in this country, mostly students and family members and labor migrants. From the perspective of Ukrainian labor migrants, numbers of Ukrainian migrants living in Europe, 12,000 is almost nothing. So Sweden didn't know almost anything about Ukraine, and Ukrainians didn't know so much about Sweden. And Romania is quite invisible country in Ukrainian context. It was quite invisible country, so we had some labor migration to this country, but we didn't compare this migration flows, for example, with Polish migration flows. And of course, it was migration to this country, but it was quite out of discussion, yes. And when people from Ukraine started migrating to just living Ukraine, yes, in the first weeks after the invasion, they started coming to Romania as a transit country. So they saw Romania as mainly as transit country that they need just to pass, and then to pass on the way to some other country. But already in the first weeks, we saw that many people, when they came into real contact with Romanian people, they changed their minds, and many people stayed. So by the end of 2022, we had 150,000 people, Ukrainians registered in Romania in general in country, people with temporal status. So this is quite a huge number compared to other. And in Sweden, it was more or less 60,000. What is interesting in this displacement in general is that when we are talking about Temporal Protection Directive and all these policies from European Union and efforts from receiving societies, what is missing from this discussion quite often, from my observation, in my opinion, is the role of Ukrainian diaspora, which was present in European Union before 2022. So as I said, Ukrainians was number of resident permits for people from Ukraine issued by European Union was like at least 500,000 per year. So Ukraine, as you see on this left bar, you see that Ukraine was on the first place among all other countries in the world by numbers of first residence permits. So it means that like every year since 2013, hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians have been coming to Europe to live, to stay, to study, or to, just to make their lives in this context. So when displacement started, it was enormous stress and challenge for all the countries. And we know the discussions, for example, from Swedish contexts, when Swedish Prime Minister said openly that Ukrainians will not come to us because Sweden is too far away from Ukraine, and Ukraine is too far away from Sweden, and we don't have any diaspora here. So they will come to Poland, they will come probably to some other countries, but not to us. And 3 hours after that, Ukrainians started coming to this country, and by the end of April, it was more or less 30 people, newcomers. But of course, it was enormous shock and challenge for all the receiving societies. What is missing is a level of efforts that Ukrainians themselves put into a moment of supporting of their co-nationals arriving from Ukraine after 2022. So, for example, there are new studies focusing, for example, or showing that at least more or less 40% of all the Polish aid, all the Polish support was done by Ukrainians themselves. Ukrainians who were part of Polish community in some way, but not quite a lot. It's like, of course, they were students, or they had some temporary labor contract or some connection to the country, but not in full moment of this word, meaning of this word. Then again, if we continue to compare these two countries, so we know that Sweden is on top of all integrational policies for migrants since 950s. So they started supporting people who are fleeing, who need help, like from different countries, from Iraq, from Eritrea, from Ethiopia, from Syria, and many other countries. And they do this, and they have a lot of policies, a lot of preparation for this. And Romania, on the other hand, it's a country without almost any refugee support system, refugee support system. So it's a country with it's a country of emigration itself. So Romanians migrate themselves in huge numbers to other countries. But when the war started, it's quite interesting to see how these traditional systems of support or systems or emergency reactions, as we have it in Romania, how they started changing in response to Ukrainian displacement. So Sweden, it's because of not because of this war and not because of Ukraine, but because of their internal migration processes. Sweden became the country where Ukrainians got the lowest level of support among all Nordic countries. So for the first 2.5 years, Ukrainians got 180 euros per month. So as you can imagine, it's absolutely impossible to survive on this money in this country. So all the people needed to go to work. And by the end of 2023, 70% of those who arrived to Sweden were already employed by Swedish labor market. If we remember, the Swedish labor market is extremely difficult to enter because of, again, other internal reasons. So we see how this became a case, yes, for in the moment when it was connected to Ukrainians. On the other hand, Romania, who didn't have any experience of supporting refugees, they also created some quite good possibilities in housing and in labor market that allowed many people from Ukraine to come and to stay. So both countries, they somehow showed themselves in unexpected light. And yeah, we can talk about this for hours, but what I'm trying to say here is that I believe that in future migration studies, this Ukrainian case will be interesting for many scholars empirically and also analytically, because it changed the dynamic how refugees, how Ukrainians were supported as refugees. And we remember that Ukrainians are not covered by a convention for refugees, that is classical convention for refugees, which was written in the context of the end of Second World War, and it was written to protect people who tried to fly from this part of the world to other countries. But in Ukrainian displacement, Ukrainians are not covered by this convention. So they are not refugees in juridical sense of this, in legal sense of this word. At the same time, they are refugees in their anthropological, in their existential way. But they acted mostly as labor migrants in the situation where they mostly didn't have any choice, any choice to survive. Only a few countries, as for example, Germany and to some extent Norway, allowed people to go this typical integrational road. That means possibility to learn language, possibility to validate their diplomas. We need to remember that 70% of those who left Ukraine, they have university degrees. So they are coming to the new countries with quite high ambitions and quite long careers in Ukraine. And this is another context, yes, that we can have into consideration when we discuss in these cases. In any case, I cannot go like through all the points that I wrote here, but yes, I think yes, sure. But what I will do now, like I have 50 minutes, like more, my last 50 minutes, and I will try to focus on some quotes and some patterns that we discovered from both countries. So these patterns that we discovered from both Sweden and Romania, just to show you through quotes and through narratives and through like testimonies from people, how people consider their future in the context of radical uncertainty that they have in connection with temporal directive on the one hand, and on the other hand, in connection how they have it in the situation of what we have now with the dynamics of the high intensive war in Ukraine. So, yes, a few words about theoretical background. I'm looking mostly into studies about temporalities of uncertainty, agency in waiting, protected displacement, and situated transnationalism. So, and one of my theoretical questions is how care strategies of displaced Ukrainian parents, mostly women, intersects with migration regimes in the situation of protracted displacement. So 4 patterns that I want to present you here. So one first model and first pattern that we see in our data is that some people from who left Ukraine and who didn't plan to leave Ukraine, they are more or less classical transmigrants with a strong engagement in the home country. So, as you know, probably from migration studies on transnationalism, more and more people today live not in context of living in one country and coming to another country, but they live in the context of 2 and 3 and even more countries. So, for example, they can work in one country and invest in another country, for example, building houses or investing in their children education who stay in the country of origin. Sometimes they can even spend their holidays and free time in the third country. Yes, they have, for example, they buy some summer house there and then navigate their life between three countries, which is even more complex. In Ukrainian case, we had transnational migrants quite a long period of time. So it was like since the 1990s when the economic crisis started and people started to migrate, a lot of them, and we know this from all our like almost everyday experiences, and I think almost every Ukrainian family has either a neighbor or someone from their family who lived in this situation for many years. Yes, like they work, for example, in Italy, and they did something in Ukraine. Yes, like back in Ukraine, like 2-3 months per year. And when we have this displacement, yes, so when we observe the displacement, so we don't observe this like typical refugee flow, like from Ukraine to Europe, like just to stay in Europe, but we see how many people, without any like additional discussions, started to engage in this transnational connections, in transnational social context. Like they knew something, like they had this experience or this knowledge in their minds, like before, like they didn't, because it's all happened. This pattern happened. We started observing this pattern quite like this after a few weeks after the invasion started. So what does it mean in practice? They try to combine both family obligations and work obligations in both countries. So, for example, children enter two schools. They have a school in receiving country and then continue studying online in Ukraine. They are extremely supportive in terms of donations for Ukrainian army, civil society, and remittances back to Ukraine. So almost in 95% they have someone left in Ukraine, either partner or someone from family members, and they continue sending remittances back to Ukraine. Doesn't matter if they have some social support from the receiving country or not. Because of this, so many Ukrainians started working in Europe. It's because of this need to send remittances back in Ukraine. Some of them visit Ukraine, but some of them not. But these physical visits are not so. I would not say not so important for them. Even if they didn't or they don't, they create a lot of different networks or like through different communities where they continue to stay in a very tight contact with Ukrainian society and with their like local community. So probably I will not like go through. Yeah, probably I will cite only one woman here because of limitation of time. Yeah, so for example, Irina from Mykolaiv, she's divorced and she has an adult son in Ukraine and another son in school age in Sweden. It's because like her first son is like has more than 18, probably 19 years. So she says, when the war started, we didn't have any doubts about where to go. My life has for a long time been connected with Sweden. Yes, she had connections with Sweden like for 20 years. Even if the war will end tomorrow, Ukraine will be going through intense trauma and recovering from it. Sweden has given my child much more than me in terms of the way of thinking, in terms of character. Therefore, in order to give him all that I could give now, going back to Ukraine is not among my main plans for the upcoming years. But at the same time, from what we know from the context of this woman, she's extremely engaged in creation new types of collaboration between Swedish municipalities and Ukrainian municipalities. So she is responsible for production, for creation, quite a new pattern of new collaborative projects between Sweden and Ukraine. And she's working like hard, she's working intensively for explaining Ukrainian work of Ukrainian municipalities for Swedish colleagues and vice versa. But at the same time, she physically decided to stay in Sweden until it's possible. Yes. So another pattern, which somehow we see, it's what we call being at a crossroad. So this group of people, they don't make any decision, and they prolong the time of making decision as long as possible. But from their like life situation and life context and how they build how they see their future, they are extremely like they explain and they show this I mean this they have this view that they should stay like between two countries, not as much engaged as the first group, because the first group is extremely engaged. They know that, I mean, they have it all clear. They stay here, but they work for Ukraine. But this group of people, they're staying like literally on a crossroad. It means that their future is extremely sensitive topic for them, and they remain mentally in both countries, and they don't want to leave any of these countries. As one of scholars of Bosnian migration to European Union said it means keep options open in different places. So they both stay and return as open-ended processes. And of course, it's a lot will be based on the juridical possibilities for them after the temporal protection will end, but we can imagine that this group probably will need more time to make any decision, and probably this group will be not making any decisions at all, as we observe this, for example, with labor migrants in Italy. So you probably know this from family stories, especially Ukrainians, where we had this pattern of women, Ukrainian women, living and working in Italy for, I would say, 20 years, but they didn't consider themselves as migrants, and they didn't consider themselves as people who live in Italy. So they spent in Italy for 10 months per year, but they didn't consider themselves as those who live in another country than Ukraine. So this group is very similar in my observation to that group which we had in Italy before the war. And in any case, this group is very open for any. I mean, they are staying in an open state, and it means that in case Ukraine would be interested to return people back, as we have this from discourse and from different narratives, it's good to know that a lot of people didn't decide anything. They will not decide anything probably like the next 10 years, because they don't want to decide anything, yes? Because migration was not their choice, life choice. They didn't choose migration. So because of this, they are staying in quite crossroad situation, yes? So you will probably already looked at narratives. So I will go to the third pattern. And the third pattern is a group where people are extremely connected to their family members. So they think themselves as part of extended family. They continue thinking themselves as a part of, so family, their family is the primary place for them. And they, not country, not even some other situations or contexts, but their family. So they have even higher ambiguity in several places. And all of them have partner, husband, and children back in Ukraine. They all experiencing professional down mobility in Sweden, but they prioritize their family. For example, their children, small children, that it's safer for them to stay outside of Ukraine. And this is even more suitcase mood, as Eglin formulated this. So it's like quite intense liminal situation without to be grounded in any place. Yes, so we had this second group, quite crossroad mindset, but this group is even more in this mindset, and they are in their inner dialogue like all the time, but we see quite a low potential to make any decision about their future. So they're mostly like going and staying in this country as long as they can stay, or they come back to Ukraine. Like, because we know 4 million of people returned already to Ukraine by September 2023. And now we see the dynamics that decreasing numbers of Ukrainians who are coming back to Ukraine, even in the situation of high intensive war. And the last pattern that I want just to mention for you, this is a group that probably will stay, in this case in Sweden, but we observe this pattern in all countries, that probably will stay in the receiving countries by any means. They will do everything for this. It's because of children, or because of their like any other private reasons. But even this group, we cannot just like see them or consider them as people who decided to cut off all the connections with Ukraine, because sometimes these people, when they make this decision about staying in the country, they became very strategical, and they became very, very focused on their integration process. And very often, specifically this group, when they integrate themselves, they become very good support and very supportive for the origin countries, for the countries of their origins, because they achieved resources. So when they become like fully members of society, they achieve resources that open them new possibilities to support their country of origin on absolutely another level of support. So this is what somehow what, of course, I would like probably to cite like more narratives here, but I can send this presentation to you if you would like to, and you will probably go through this yourselves. But what is my main idea in this presentation is that Ukrainian displacement after 2022 is a part of bigger and more bigger, complex and quite dynamic processes with Ukrainian emigration that we experienced before. Nothing is sure and nothing is understandable with what will happen with these millions of people after 2027 or in some other time of period, because most of these people didn't decide to migrate. They were expelled. They were like forced to migrate. It doesn't mean that they didn't have their agency in this decision. It doesn't mean that they didn't somehow impact their future. Of course they do, because they're very many of them are very people with high agency and responsibilities. But at the same time, this situation is very open and uncertain and in progress. And what I'm trying to say or to highlight when I'm presenting both for audiences outside of Ukraine and for audiences in Ukraine, I'm trying to say that probably we need to study more this displacement and to go deeper into this, and not to make very hastily conclusions, because we are in a situation when everything is at stake when it comes to Ukraine. And I would say I would see as many possibilities open as possible. And Ukrainian diaspora is extremely strong and extremely important resource of support for Ukrainian society that stay in their like physical places in Ukraine. So this is a few like slides and words that I wanted to present for you. And I am open for discussion.